Every so often I find myself, I guess, with too much time on my hands. When that happens, I tend to overthink things. Right to the point where negative thoughts and self-doubt start to creep in. Now, this happened not too long ago, and I started to wonder if I was doing right by St. John's. I don't have the educational background to handle some of the things I've been doing. Maybe someone else should be head usher. Maybe I shouldn't even try to be a liturgist, and sure don't have any business being up here preaching. So, okay, before I made any sudden changes, I made an appointment to see Pastor Sue, just to talk things over and let I know that I did have concerns. Well, Pastor Sue is a real good listener, and she offers some great advice. And I left her office with a much better attitude about keeping up with what I've been doing. I guess the only downside of that is you're stuck with me again today. Good. Thank you. But one subject I brought up was I really never had any training to be a preacher. I don't really know how. I can't preach. I'm a storyteller. And her reply, without hesitation, was, Jesus was a storyteller. Huh. That puts me in some pretty lofty company, and I can't keep up with Jesus. I can't write parables or anything, but maybe I can just take some of the stories of Jesus, throw in a couple other storytellers, and put a little different spin on them and see what happens. I'm not really a betting man, but I think it's pretty safe to say that I'm not the only one in this room that remembers Elvis. Oh yeah. How he came along in the mid-1950s and his unconventional style and his blend of country, rock, and blues music. And he did something that nobody else had ever been able to do before. He mesmerized an entire generation. Now, all the girls loved him. They thought he was great. The guys despised him. They sure wanted to be like him. Now, about that same time, there was another Southern country boy that came along. And all he had to do was walk out on stage, strap on his guitar, and say, "Hi, I'm Johnny Cash." And he would sing songs to people in prison, migrant workers, farmers, coal miners, anybody that was down on their luck. And he sang songs that you just wanted to sing along with. And you could, because anybody could sing Johnny Cash songs. Before Elvis and Johnny was Hank Williams. He was a musical genius. He could put more of a story into one of his songs than you find in most novels. Now, one common bond that these three had is they were all born dirt poor. They had fame and fortune thrust on them, and they didn't know how to handle it. This led to some bad decisions later on, and in some cases led to their downfall. But they left a legacy that's going to live on forever. They all went back to their roots. They all loved gospel music. It's interesting that Elvis was known as the king of rock and roll, but his music awards are for gospel music. No one got a much more humble start or left more of a legacy than Jesus. God could have chosen anyone to raise his son for him. Could have chosen a king or a nobleman or any aristocratic family. He chose a carpenter named Joseph and his child bride Mary. And when you think about it, that makes perfect sense. Jesus could have been raised by a king who never really has to do anything he doesn't want to do, or by a carpenter that knows that when he starts something, he's got to finish it. His life depends on it. top it off, Joseph and Mary have to travel to Bethlehem just as she's about due to give birth, just to pay their taxes and be counted. And they can't find shelter. So Jesus was born in a stable with the animals. This kind of makes sense too, because when Herod sent his men out to find and destroy this great new king, the last place they'd look would be in a stable. I'll confess, I don't know much about Jesus' early years, except that he lived in Nazareth. Nazareth, of all places. Everyone knows nothing good ever come out of Nazareth. If they'd had railroad tracks back in those days, Nazareth would have been on the other side of them. Jesus' story really begins when he's baptized in the Jordan River by his cousin John. The heavens open up and God proclaims him to be his son. And everyone is expecting this great Messiah who's going to conquer the Roman Empire and lead them into victory. Surprise. Jesus don't work that way. Jesus just goes about performing his miracles and takes care of the sick and the poor. He preaches his sermons and he tells his stories to all who would listen. He gathered the disciples, and even they don't seem to grasp what he's trying to accomplish. Reminds me of Holden Caulfield. He was the main character in J.D. Salinger's book, Catcher in the Rye. He said he didn't care much for the disciples. About as much use to Jesus as a hole in the head. All they ever did was keep letting him down. He said he liked almost anyone in the Bible better than the disciples, even the lunatic that lived in the cave. Holden Caulfield wasn't a real great guy either. But Jesus kept on looking for peaceful solutions to terrible problems, and people began to doubt him no matter what he accomplished. Even John the Baptist sent word out from his prison cell, "Are you the Messiah we've been waiting for? Or should we just keep on waiting?" Jesus sends word back to him, "Look, I can cure lepers, I can make blind people see, make cripples get up and walk, I can even bring dead people back to life. That ain't miraculous, boy. I don't know what is. I'm your guy. I'm the one you've been waiting for. Come on, smarten up. Have faith." Well, maybe he didn't quite use those words, but you get my drift. Simple, peaceful solutions to complicated and often violent problems. You just got to have faith. There was a really great movie from a few years called Amistad. If you haven't seen it, I recommend that you do. It's a true story of a group of slaves that sue for their freedom and win. It didn't hurt them any that they had John Quincy Adams on their side, but it tells what can be accomplished against impossible odds if you persevere. In one memorable scene, the slave gets a hold of a Bible and he actually begins to study it. He can't speak or read a word of English, but he figures out the whole story of Christ just from the illustrations and begins to explain it to the other slaves. Now, such is the story of Jesus. Simple, easy to understand. There's something in there for everyone. You just got to have faith. Now, a lot of movies and documentaries about Jesus' life actually focus on the way he died. I know how he died. I'd much rather learn how he lived. Wouldn't you? He was a little weird, and we all feared. He wasn't one of us. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke, and he wouldn't even cuss. You'd see him now and then with a bunch of men down beside the sea, and I know I would have liked him more if he was a little more like me. A little more like me? I think I should try real hard to be a lot more like him. Just saying. Amen.